Hey, Divine Ones, happy Sunday. It's good to see you. I was gone for a while because I was on vacation out of the country. I went to the Dominican Republic to be with my family and as well as to just get some nourishment time in to recharge my energy. So it's good to be with you. I wanted to do today's video based upon a question that I've received. Actually received this question often over the last few years, but I received it a few times within the last few days based upon the video that I posted on my page a few days ago, which I talked about why good people often die young. And in that video, I talked a lot about why making your transition isn't seen as a negative thing per se. You know, it may not be something you want to rush into, but it's not negative because death is not a negative. That, as a matter of fact, the other side is actually a blissful experience because you experience the fullness of your soul. And so I got a lot of questions that were asking me if the other side is so wonderful and so blissful and such a magical place, why would we come here and why would we stay here in this lifetime? And so I want to speak to that. I want to speak to that in this video and really try to shed some light on that. Because again, I know for many people I've gotten that question countless times over the years. As I've talked about my near-death experience, as I've talked about my work as a medium, as I've talked about many different things, I've often talked about the other side and the experience of the other side and becoming the fullness of your soul. And what many people will call, the other side being heaven, and why, if that's such a wonderful place, again, why we come here and why should I even stay here and why is, this place. So I want to speak to a few things. One is that this world, this reality, this dimension, this planet, this earth is not a punishment. And it's not like the fixer-upper reality. This is actually prime real estate. This is where your soul wanted to be most of all. So something to understand before we dive into this, because I really want to share with you why loving ourselves is the key to experiencing heaven on earth. But before I go into that, to really understand that from your soul's perspective, so before we become human, before we manifest into a human experience, but when we're in our soul essence, right, when we're connected to all that is, when we're in God consciousness or the oneness dimension, if you will, you do not make any decisions for yourself that aren't completely based in joy. So this is the first thing to understand. So the soul does not, and there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of messages out there that say things like we come here to learn and to prove ourselves so that we can move on to other dimensions and we'll never come back here again. And that's just a false premise. That's actually not what actually happens. The first thing to understand is when you are in God consciousness, when you are in the God dimension pretty much, and you are one with God or source, however you call it, you only make decisions and intentions from the space of joy. You only make something from what you really, really want to do because you because you know that thing is going to lead you to a higher experience of joy. That is all that you make that decision from. You don't make it from a sense of obligation. You don't make it from a sense of responsibility. You don't make it from a feeling of being less than, and so that you have something to prove, because that's not what you are. When you are in the soul dimension, you know that you are 100% worthy, that you are loved, that there's nothing lacking about you, and that everything that you want, you deserve, and that you only deserve to experience expansion and joy. So if you chose to become human, you chose it because you wanted the experience of it because of the joy you thought you were going to experience. So for example, from the soul's dimension, there is no such thing as like relationship. So if you have kids and you love your children, if you have a lover and you love your partner, if you have friends and you love the experience of that, there's no other. There's no sense of relationships on the spiritual plane because there's only oneness. So there's not like an other. There's not an other besides yourself. It's just you. It's just all of you. So you come here to experience relationships. So that's one thing. There's also, you come here to experience pleasure, like sex. Sex is not in the spiritual dimension, right? Because you don't have a physical body. So you come here to experience things like that. You come here to eat delicious food because you don't have mouths and taste buds in the spiritual dimension. You come here to experience joy and all the pleasures that physicality, that it offers. And if you're not experiencing joy, it's not because you don't deserve it. It's not because this planet does not have the capability to offer it to you. It's just that you have been disconnected from the energy that allows you to create that or to manifest that experience. Because I won't say create, because create usually we look at creation as something you're necessarily intending or asking for. But it's more you manifest that something that you experience that shows up for you in your life experience. So if you're not experiencing a delicious life, it's not because you don't deserve it. It's not because this earth is a horrible place and doesn't have the capability to give it to you. Is that when you manifest it here, some type of way, usually in your childhood, by the environment, the caregivers that you had, or the authority figures around you, or the people in your environment, or the environment that was around you, disconnected you from the truth of yourself and from the energy of yourself that allows you to manifest a delicious life experience. And this is why loving yourself is so important. Learning to love yourself is very, 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 very vitally important. This is why I say you have to love yourself. Me and many other teachers will say you have to love yourself like your life depends on it, because it does. And until you love yourself, nothing can work well in your life and be delicious in your life. And I'm going to talk about that and go into detail about that here in a second. But I wanted to first say that this is not the fixer-up reality. You came into this reality understanding that you had all capability to create whatever you wanted here, that there was nothing outside of you that determined what you got to create, that it was all, and remember, I've talked a lot about how our reality is created is a mirror reflection of our internal state of being. So this external physical reality is a reflection and a mirrored reflection of how you feel internally. So how you feel internally, your internal state of being, which means the beliefs that you hold, like the definitions of you hold about what's true for you and about you, and how you feel about yourself, like how you emotionally feel. And not just like how you emotionally feel right now, but kind of the pattern about how you emotionally feel. Do you feel worthy or do you feel less than? Do you feel scared a lot? Do you feel suppressed? Do you feel depressed a lot? Like your internal state of being determines your external reality, and it manifests your external reality. So the experiences, events, and the relationships that get manifested for you in your reality are going to be a reflection of how you feel. So if you don't feel worthy, you're going to manifest experiences, relationships, and events that make you feel unworthy. That mirror that and affirm that for you. But if you feel differently, and I'm going to speak about this again, but if you feel worthy and you're connected to your truth, that you're enough, that you're not alone, that you're safe in this world, that you deserve good things, then that's the experiences that will be the events, experiences and relationships that get manifested for you are going to mirror and affirm that. So what ends up happening, again, is a lot of times, and this is not a fault, right? That not a fault of yours or us or any of us, but we come into experiences here where sometimes we get the people that are around us when we're kids teach us things that they teach us one of two things. They teach us things that either help us affirm and honor and express the truth of our divinity, which is our divine essence, our God essence, which is we're worthy, we're enough, we deserve good things, we deserve to get our needs met, we're safe in this world, we're not alone. and that we are powerful beings and worthy beings. Like, that's the truth of your divinity. So you either come into a space that affirms and allows you to express that, or they teach us how to reject and deny that. Reject and deny our divinity. So they teach us that there's something wrong with us, that the world is not safe, that this isn't really a blissful and heaven-like experience. And so we develop these beliefs that reject our divinity, and so we experience and we create and manifest a world, even though that's not the world we want. See, that's another thing. You don't necessarily create what you want. So this is what there's a lot of misperceptions about the teachings, especially about the law of attraction. The law of attraction is very real, but there's a lot of teachings around it from people out there in the world that aren't really wholly true. And so you don't necessarily create what you want. Hey, everybody, and good morning. I see you all commenting. So you don't necessarily create what you want. You create how you feel. You create what's going on in your internal state. So you may want a very loving partner, and you may want a very delicious life experience, but how you feel internally, you may not feel that you're worthy of that. You may not feel good enough. You may feel less than. You may not feel that life can be delicious. You may feel life is very scary. And so that's the reality you're going to manifest instead of what you want. In order to manifest what you want, you have to have an internal state of being that supports that. And that's why doing the loving yourself work is very, very, very important. So I wanted to lay the ground for that first. First and foremost, so again, first and foremost, the soul chooses to come here because it wants it. It's like chomping at the bit to come here. It is very excited about the experience of being human. It is very excited about the joy and the experiences of relationships and pleasure and the expansion and growth that it wants. It chooses to come here from joy. There isn't some obligation or responsibility why our souls choose to come here. That's not what happens. You choose it from your God place. And so from your God place, there's nothing external that's forcing you to do anything. It's an internal desire. It's an internal passion, really, for why you want to come here. And you just get disconnected from that passion. And loving yourself, the practice of loving yourself, reconnects you not just to the passion, but to the power and the energy that will allow you to fulfill your desire for being here and to experience a delicious life, so that this life doesn't feel like suffering. It doesn't feel like pain. It doesn't feel like isolation. It doesn't feel like terror, right? And a lot of us, and myself included, when when we have been disconnected from our divinity, that's what our life experiences feel like. They are suffering. They're painful. They are terrorful sometimes, terror-filled. There's sporadic bits of joy and love that we experience instead of a saturation of love and joy and fulfillment. And the key to and the answer to that is to I'm sorry, guys. When I do lives in different places, sometimes my internet connection is down. So hopefully, the internet connection will stay up so I can finish this video. But when we come in with the intention of joy, and we come in from the intention of joy. And so we come in basically knowing that we are going to experience heaven on earth. That's why you come here. That's why you're here. You're not here to prove yourself, because you are source energy manifested, so you don't have anything to prove. You are worthiness itself. So you're not here to prove yourself. You're not here to try to prove yourself to go to some higher dimension and never come back to earth. You're going to be back, because this is a very delicious place to be, right? And you may, although you may not be experiencing it as delicious, yes, and I'm going to speak about how to switch over to experiencing your life as delicious, and this earth realm is delicious. But that's why you're here. You're here because this is the delicious place to be, and you're not trying to escape it. Your soul is not trying to escape this reality, right? That's why you're here. It came because it knew that, and it knows the potential that this reality has for deliciousness. So, why do I say that loving ourselves is the key to experiencing deliciousness? Is the key to experiencing heaven on earth, because that's why you're here. You're here to experience. You came from heaven to experience heaven on earth. And then your intention was to experience heaven on earth and then go back to the dimension of heaven, right? That's the experience. You come from the dimension of heaven to experience heaven on earth, and then you go back to heaven. The soul wants to experience all different types of joy and love, and all the different manifestations that joy and love can come in. And one of the manifestations that joy and love can come in is a human form. So let me talk why loving ourselves is the key, and why I teach it, why it's at the center core of my teachings. So there are three kind of cardinal rules for loving ourselves, right? They're the three kind of cardinal rules. And those three rules are to cherish yourself, to honor yourself, and to nourish yourself. That's really, if you boil down the practice of self-love, and loving ourselves is the practice of embodying love energy, which is source energy. It's the practice of feeling more love energy within our vibration, within our energy, and feeling it more in our lives, right? That's at the very core essence. That's what loving ourselves is about. And there are kind of three cardinal rules for how to go about that. Cherish yourself, honor yourself, nourish yourself. So let's talk about cherish yourself. When you cherish yourself, right? When you don't cherish yourself, and what cherish yourself means is that you value yourself, you appreciate yourself, you feel good about yourself, you celebrate yourself. Like basically you value and feel good about yourself. Right? So here's what happens when you don't cherish yourself. When you don't cherish yourself, there are two things that happen. The first thing that happens is when you don't feel good about yourself and value yourself, it's impossible to have a high vibration. It's impossible, right? And remember I said in the beginning that our external reality is created by our internal state of being. So basically what we believe about ourselves and what we believe is true for ourselves, and how we feel about ourselves. So if you don't feel good about yourself, if you don't believe that you're enough, if you think there's something wrong with you, right? If you were made to believe somehow that there's something wrong with you, whether there's something wrong with your body, there's something wrong with your sexuality, there's something wrong with your personality, there's something wrong with how you look, your skin color, your gender, there's something wrong with, something wrong with you, right? So you don't feel wholly enough. You don't feel worthy. And you don't really fully value yourself, it's hard for you to feel good about yourself. You can't feel good about yourself on a consistent basis when you don't cherish yourself. So if you don't cherish yourself, you're going to manifest a life experience that doesn't fully cherish you either. It's going to be hard to fully manifest a relationship that cherishes you, when a partner who cherishes you, when you don't cherish yourself. It's going to be very hard to manifest a life experience that feels like it cherishes you, and it feels like it makes you feel worthy and enough and valuable when you don't feel that, because the life experience is not happening to you, it's happening through you. So it gets manifested through you. So and I've spoken about this in many different videos, so I'm not going to take a long time on this, but it's how you feel about yourself is the filter through which your life experience gets manifested through. And so if that filter is a filter of non-cherishing, then you cannot manifest a cherishing life experience until you begin to clean that filter out and have a cherishing feeling. So that's the first thing, right? So if you don't cherish yourself, it's impossible to have an internal state of being that feels good and allows you to manifest a life that feels good. And that's where vibration comes in. If you don't cherish yourself, you can't have a high enough vibration to attract and manifest the desires you really want. The other thing about if you don't cherish yourself that happens, and why you won't, so you can't experience heaven on earth because of that. The second thing is when we don't cherish ourselves, it's really hard to choose. Actually, we don't. It's not just hard. We just don't. We don't make choices that really support us, that are healthy choices for us, that are empowering choices for us. and that lead to outcomes that are very beneficial for us. When we don't value ourselves and we don't cherish ourselves, we usually will make choices that lead us into just detrimental situations. We don't choose good partners in relationships, right? We choose people who don't cherish us. We don't choose work for ourselves that cherishes us and makes us feel enough when we don't cherish ourselves. It's very hard to make choices and to offer behaviors that will support and nourish us when we don't cherish ourselves. So we're making choices that don't allow us to experience heaven when we don't cherish ourselves. So not only are we not, when we don't cherish ourselves, we don't hold an internal state of being that allows us to manifest a heavenly experience, but we don't also make choices for ourselves that allow ourselves to experience heaven either. So that's the first thing. That's the first cardinal rule, is to cherish ourselves. But when we do cherish ourselves, when we do feel worthy, right, and we feel enough, and we value ourselves, we feel good about how we look, we feel good about our identity, we feel good about, our personality, and again, unconditionally, right? We feel good about ourselves. And, I've talked a lot about my own journey around that, about how I was taught not how to, my experiences of childhood taught me not how to cherish myself, right? I didn't know how to really feel good about myself, and how I understood that all of the trauma and traumatic experiences and suffering and illnesses and diseases that I manifested were a part of that was because I wasn't taught how to cherish myself, and I was manifesting things out of not cherishing myself. But when I began to cherish myself, when I began to do the work of loving myself and cherishing myself, through cherishing myself, I began to feel better about myself internally. I began to feel good, and all of a sudden the things that began to manifest in my life were totally different. Not only did my body begin to heal, but my life experience, the work I did in the world, like the work I'm doing now, supports me. It not just financially, but it supports the joy I have in the world. I love what I do. I am very passionate about what I do. It makes me very happy to sit here and do these videos with you all, and to do and work with you all individually as clients. So I was able to manifest work for myself that nourished and cherished me and supported me. I manifest the type of relationships I manifest are totally different today. I have very fulfilling relationships. I was with people who didn't really cherish me and honor me, that made me feel like I wasn't enough. And now, my relationships, they make me feel enough. They support and affirm my worthiness. And so when we do the work of loving ourselves, life becomes more delicious. When we cherish ourselves, we manifest experiences that are cherishing for us, and make us seem like life is really delicious. So the second cardinal rule is honor yourself. So what that means is that you respect yourself, right? And that you protect yourself. And so that looks like, trusting ourselves and being ourselves and having boundaries that allow us to protect our energy and not feel drained and depleted and dishonored, right? And so when we don't honor ourselves, right? When we're not, let's do the first part. When we don't honor ourselves by being ourselves, then we feel suppressed. We don't experience freedom, because the feeling of freedom, the vibration of freedom, one of the core elements to experiencing the vibration of freedom in our lives is to be ourselves, to be all of ourselves, our full authentic self. When there's an aspect of our being that we're suppressing, right? And the reason why we suppress ourselves is because we were taught some type of way, usually in our childhood, that part of ourselves, if we embraced that part and we expressed it, then we would either be rejected, or we would be abandoned, or love would be withheld from us some type of way. We would be punished. And so you believe that part of yourself is going to lead to some type of detrimental experience, right? Especially what you really believe is that you're not going to experience love. And so you'll suppress it, right? And so, for example, I suppressed my sexuality for a long time because I was made to believe that being attracted to the same gender meant there was something wrong and sinful with me, and that people would reject me and that they would criticize me. And I experienced some of that. And so that made me suppress it. That made me not be myself for many years. But because I was doing that, and I did it to try and hope and get approval and try and get belonging. But what ended up happening is I may have gotten approval sometimes, but I never felt free. I felt in bondage. I never felt fully myself. And again, if you feel, and so if you don't feel free, again, in your internal state of being doesn't feel good. You feel in bondage. So what's going to happen? I manifested a life that made me feel like I wasn't free. I never did work that made me feel like I was free, right? I was always doing work that made me feel suppressed in some type of way. I couldn't be really it didn't feel like I was expressing my true self. It didn't feel like not just my sexuality, but just my true personality. It felt oppressive to me. I was always doing work that felt oppressive to me. My life felt oppressive to me. And so when we're not being our true self in some way, whatever that is, right? Also, another part of my being, you've heard me talk about, is my spirituality, my intuitive and psychic gifts. I suppressed those for many years because I grew up in a traditional Christian home and in a traditional Christian culture. And I was made to believe that those things were evil or unholy, and that if you had those, you were going to be rejected, or you were going to, again, criticized or punished some type of way. And so I hid those. And I was very scared to fully embody them like I'm embodying now, because I feared the backlash, and I feel the ramifications of what I thought that was going to be. And again, so I felt in bondage, and I felt suppressed. And I never lived a life that truly made me feel free when I was doing those things. And so when we do that, when we're not honoring ourselves by being ourselves, we don't live a free life. And heaven feels free. Heaven is if you've ever listened to many people who've had near-death experiences, a lot of them will say the experience of heaven was one of the greatest experiences of freedom they've ever felt, because that's what the energy of heaven is. It's freedom. So to experience heaven on earth, you got to be free. You got to experience freedom. And so loving yourself by honoring yourself is one of the keys by being yourself is one of the keys to feeling freedom. And again, if you have any suppression of yourself, if you're judging yourself and saying, this part of me is not enough, so I'm not going to be it. This part of me is not enough, so I'm not going to express it. Or this part of me is not safe, so I'm not going to be it. If any part of you feels like you're not expressing it, or it's being shoved to the side, or it's being pushed down, you're not going to feel good internally. And so you're not going to manifest a life that feels good internally. The second part of that is trusting yourself. So if you're not honoring yourself by trusting yourself, and not just trusting this part of yourself, but trusting your higher self, trusting your soul, trusting the universe, then when we don't trust, we don't feel safe. It's hard for us to feel safe in the world, and we don't manifest a life that feels trustworthy. When we don't have true trust in our being, when we're taught not to trust, and again, none of this is this isn't the way you feel and the way you believe. Usually, is not your fault. It's usually the result of something that happened, what you were taught in your childhood, or something that happened to you in your childhood that made you think a different way than what your divine truth really is. So this is not about fault, but it's about responsibility. Like loving ourselves now, like the disconnection and the suffering and whatever is not your fault, but the healing of that and the reconnection of yourself so that you can manifest heaven now is your responsibility. It's your ability to respond, to do what you need to do to experience heaven and to reconnect to yourself. So when you don't trust, then it's impossible to be divinely guided. It's impossible to be guided to your good, because the soul and source speaks through your being. And if you're not taught how to trust that, and if you don't trust that, then it's impossible to manifest a life that feels trustworthy. You're going to manifest a life that doesn't feel, you're going to create a life for yourself that makes you afraid, that feels like things are out of your control, that is going to feel like this life is not safe and it's not a trustworthy thing. And so that's what happens. That's why it doesn't feel like heaven. It feels like hell. when we don't have an energy and move through with a belief system that we can trust life and we can trust ourselves. So, and when you're not, and trusting yourself is a part of honoring yourself. But when you begin to trust, then life has to prove itself trustworthy. The universe has to prove itself trustworthy. When you have when you go through, when you have a feeling that you're safe in this world, and this world is safe, and that you're going to be guided to your good, and that whatever's happening is serving you. You know, it may not be what you prefer, but it is serving you, and it's going to work out in your favor. And when you move through the world knowing that no matter what it looks like, it's working. No matter what it looks like right now, it's going to work out for you. When you have a trusting mindset and a belief set, and you have a trusting energy, things have to match that. They have to affirm that. Remember, your internal state of being determines your external reality. Your external reality is only a reflection of your internal state of being. So when you change your internal state of being to "my life is safe," and this is something I'm a living witness for, because I did not move through the world trusting. I was made to believe that life wasn't safe for me because, again, in my sexuality, I was made to believe, in my spirituality, I was made to believe that, you know, I needed to protect myself because around any corner, something was going to come around and, you know, hurt me or reject me or something. And when I did the work of healing that, and I did the work of beginning to trust that it was safe, that who I am is safe in this world, and that this world is a good place, and that the universe is, everything is serving me, and that no matter what it looks like, and you've heard me say one of my favorite mantras, one of my favorite affirmations in the world is, no matter what it looks like right now, this situation is working out in my favor. When I began to really use that and believe it, miracles happened in my life. No matter what it looked like, no matter how horrific it looked like on the outside, that situation worked out in the most blissful way for me. And I move through the world now with just life working itself out well. All around, like around every corner, life just works out well for me. And so when we begin to trust, that's what happens. We begin to manifest and experience a very trustworthy life where we feel held. That's another thing, that when I had my near-death experience, I explained that, like, what it felt like for me, the other side felt like for me, is that I was always held, that all was well, all is always well, and in all ways well, that I am always held around every corner. Something's working out for me, and things are trying to support and nourish me. So when we trust, that's the experience that we get. We get this experience of being held, and like the universe is holding us and there for us and rooting for us and on our side at all times, and that all is well. When we don't feel that, and we don't manifest the world where we get evidence of that. The other part of it is, so you be yourself, you trust yourself, and then you protect yourself, right? So boundaries, right? So when we're not loving ourselves, it's very hard for us to, and not just very hard. I don't know many people who don't. I don't know anybody who does it. When we're not loving ourselves, we don't have good boundaries. When we don't honor ourselves when we're not loving ourselves by honoring ourselves, we don't have boundaries. So what that means is, what our boundaries are is not about pushing somebody away from us, right? Or walling ourselves up. Our boundaries, our healthy boundaries, are ways in which we protect our life force energy. We keep it from being drained. We keep ourselves from feeling disrespected or violated, right? So my boundary is not to push you away. It's so that my energy stays in my body and I feel good and I don't feel violated or disempowered or disrespected. Because when you feel that way, again, your internal state, you're going to manifest a world that continues to affirm that and reflect that. So boundaries, right? When we're not communicating to people what we need to feel honored, and what we need to feel safe, and what we need to feel love and joy with them. And when we don't communicate to other people what's acceptable with us and what's not, and when we don't have consequences for when people cross those boundaries, then it drains our life force energy from us. And something that happens when we don't have boundaries and our life force energy is continuing to be drained from us because of it is we manifest illnesses. because our bodies need a high level of life force energy within us to stay healthy. And also, when you don't have a lot of life force energy in you, you don't have a high vibration. So you don't manifest the stuff that you want. You don't manifest your dreams. You don't manifest your innermost desires and cravings. You can't manifest those when you have a low vibration and low life force energy, because your boundaries are continuing to be crossed and your needs are not getting met, because you feel because you're consistently feeling dishonored, you feel disempowered, you feel violated. And another thing, when we don't have boundaries, we're not honoring ourselves by having healthy boundaries in all our spaces, is we begin to, when our boundaries are continually crossed, we begin to feel resentment. We start to feel a lot of resentment. And so, but again, one of the things for me is I was taught to be a nice boy all the time and a good boy. So what that meant was I always showed up for others. I was always overgiving. And I didn't communicate my boundaries because I didn't want to cause conflict. But what that left me feeling was I was always feeling dishonored. I was never getting my needs met. I was always feeling disrespected. And I had a lot of resentment. And again, I talk about, where my illnesses came from. That's where they came from. Because that's one of the places. So I wasn't cherishing myself and I wasn't honoring myself. So, of course, I couldn't stay healthy, and the illnesses showed up as a manifestation of that. And not just being healthy, but I wasn't living a life that tasted good to me. My life didn't taste good. It felt like I was constantly being dishonored and disrespected. I was constantly being violated. My needs weren't getting met, and I wasn't cherishing myself. So I didn't experience heaven. And we can't experience heaven when we're not doing that. So, but when we do honor ourselves, when we do have healthy boundaries and we communicate our boundaries often, what we feel is honored. What we feel, instead of disrespected, is we feel respected. Instead of violated, we feel cherished. Instead of resentful, we feel love. Right? It's hard to experience love with someone when there's no boundaries there, because that person is going to continue to cross your boundaries, right? If you haven't communicated what's okay with you and what's acceptable with you and what's not, then they're going to continue to do the things that's not. And you're not going to feel love. Instead, you're going to feel resentment. And you're going to feel like you need to pull away from that person. And you're going to feel like you're not going to feel connected to that person. You're not going to feel oneness with that person. And so this is why boundaries are so important to experiencing heaven on earth. Right? And this is why loving ourselves, a big part of loving ourselves, is setting boundaries. Because boundaries allow the love to flow. Without them, disrespect, disempowerment, violation, and resentment is going to flow. So that's one of the other keys, right? So you cherish yourself and you honor yourself. If you can do those two things, you're going to experience more heaven on earth. And you have to learn how to do these things. Most of us were not taught how to do that. We weren't taught how to set boundaries. We weren't taught how to fully be ourselves. As a matter of fact, I just did this post yesterday around being ourselves. Is a part of being ourselves is speaking and living our truth. But most of us don't speak and live our truth, not because we don't want to, but because we were taught in some way that if we spoke our truth or if we lived our truth, we weren't going to be loved. And I did this post yesterday that said you can speak your truth and you can live your truth and still be loved. Well, that's part of this. Like, if you were taught that if you spoke your truth, if you were in your childhood, especially in your childhood some way, and you spoke what was, if you were honest about something, or honest about what you needed, or honest about who you were, or honest about what you did, or honest about you didn't want to go somewhere, or you didn't want to do something that your caregivers, like whether your parents or your peers or your family or whatever, or your teacher or whatever, if you didn't want to do something that they wanted you to do and you said no and you were honest about it, what usually happens, right? You're either punished or you're criticized or they get angry or whatever. And so in your mind, what you're taught is what in your subconscious mind goes, well, speaking my truth, like being honest and speaking my truth means people are going to get upset, or I'm going to be punished, or I'm going to be rejected, or love is going to be withheld from me. So what do? You don't do it. You don't speak the truth, because what you want more than anything is the feeling of being loved and feeling honored and you want all of that, so you begin to not do it. Same thing with living your truth. If you lived your truth when you were young, let's say something about you was quirky, or it wasn't something about your truth was out of the norm, not out of the norm for the whole of society, but just in your environment, like in your caregiving system or in your family, your truth was different from everybody else's, right? Or even just slightly, right? So let's say, you, again, my truth was that I had intuitive and psychic gifts and I was same gender loving. That was very different from the environment I grew up in and the family system I was in. So I was made to feel like if I was doing that and I was going to be being very different from everybody wasn't safe, and that I was going to be rejected or criticized in some way, or they were going to withhold love from me in some way. So what did I do? I didn't do it. And that's kind of what ends up happening. Why we're not really fully ourselves a lot is because we've been made to believe that love will be withheld from us in some form. Love, either withholding of love through rejection, through punishment, or through abandonment or separation. And so we don't do it. But the truth is, if you don't live your truth and you don't speak it, you'll never feel free. And you'll never fully feel like yourself. And you can't hold a high enough vibration then to create what you really want and to experience a life that feels free. So those are the first two cardinal rules. You got to cherish yourself. You got to honor yourself. The last one is nourish yourself. And so what I mean by that is most of us are taught that we're just a biological being. We're just a physical being. And so we're taught about our physical needs and how to meet our biological needs, like eating food, like you have a need to eat, right? You need to nourish yourself with food. You have a need for sleep. You have a need for air, right? To breathe. That's the biological needs, like eating, rest, air, breathing, drinking water, right? Those are biological needs. But what we're not taught is there's two parts to your being. There's the biological aspect, which is the physical part, which is what you see. Then there's the spiritual aspect, which is the soul part. And the soul part is energy. That's what non-physical really is energy. And that's the biggest part of you. That's the biggest part of your being, is the soul part of you. This part, the human biological part, is the smallest part of you. The soul is the biggest part, and it has needs too. And its basic needs, really, right? So, just like your biological being needs to eat, it needs to drink, it needs to sleep. Like, those are its basic needs, right? And if you don't meet those needs, then you're going to suffer. It's going to be detrimental to you, right? And if you don't continue to meet them, you're going to transpire. You're going to die, right? Because your body, in order to thrive, the biological, physical form, in order to thrive, needs these needs met. Your soul has needs too. Your energy has needs too. Your energy basically needs to feel good. And the things it needs most of all is the feeling of love, joy, freedom, right? And so we talked about freedom, right, in the last part. So being yourself and doing things that allow you to feel like you can express the fullness of yourself is how you fuel your energy with freedom, right? But love and joy. So if you're not nourishing and that's how you nourish yourself, just like you nourish your biological body with food and rest and water, right? And good air, clean air, that's how you nourish your biological body. You got to nourish your energy body. You got to nourish your soul body. And again, that's the biggest part. And why I'm saying that's the biggest part is because when that's not nourished, it is impossible to be well. And it is impossible, more than not getting the right types of food in. When your energy is not nourished, it is impossible to stay healthy, and it is impossible to have a thriving, delicious, heaven-like life. And so you've got to, and again, what your energy needs is freedom, love, and joy. So love, do you have a sense of belonging in community? Right? Do you have a sense of fulfilling relationships? Right? You need that. So if the majority of your relationships aren't fulfilling and you don't feel like you belong, then you are not getting your need for love met. You're not nourishing yourself. If you don't feel like you are valued, if you don't feel like you're seen and you're heard and you're cherished, right? By the people around you. If you don't have any people around you that make you feel seen, heard, and cherished and supported, then you don't feel loved, and you're missing, and you're not getting your need for love met. The other thing too with love is, we talked about yourself. So you need love from yourself. You need to cherish yourself. And so when you don't have that, your life force energy is going to drain, because that's what your needs, your soul energy. That's what life force energy is your soul energy. Your soul energy is going to be drained and depleted in your body, and your body can't stay well when it doesn't have enough of your soul's energy within it. It was literally created to house the energy of your soul. And when your soul's energy isn't there, it's not going to be well. That's where we manifest illnesses and diseases. They're not enemies, and they're not betrayals by our bodies. They're literally indicators. Illnesses show up to indicate to us that we're malnourished, that we don't have enough of the energy of our soul, or life, what people call life force energy, that we don't have enough energy, life force energy in our bodies. Just like the indicator in your car comes on when you're running low on the fuel your car needs to run, which is gas or electricity or whatever. When it's running low, there's an indicator that comes on in your car that says, stop what you're doing and refuel yourself. Same thing with illnesses and diseases. So when most of us go through life sick, and so we think life is not worth living, right? It's because we're not fueling ourselves with what makes us feel like life is worth living, which is fulfilling relationships, work that we're passionate about, that we're excited about, that makes us, breathes life through us instead of mundane work. You're not meant to work these mundane jobs, you guys. You're not meant to work these things that make you feel drained, that make you feel highly stressed, that make you feel depressed. You are here to live a life, going back to the beginning of this video, your soul incarnated here for joy. Not joy once a month or a few times a year. The arc of joy. Like your life is supposed to be mostly, the majority, right? Joy-filled and joyful. And so you're supposed to work something that makes you feel joy. That's how you nourish your energy and fuel it, right? And it's not just once. Like, again, you don't just eat once a month and feel like you've nourished your body. You don't just drink a glass of water once a month and feel like you're nourished your body. You wouldn't do that. You know that you need to nourish your body with those types of things several times, and usually several times a day. Same thing with your energy. You've got to nourish your energy with love and joy a lot. Like, not every hour of the day, but a few times in the day.